damaged in dozens of places. Hayes could have destroyed it easily. Every instinct told him to finish the job. But he had not come here to commit genocide. He opened a communication channel. Krell vessel, this is Admiral Jacob Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. You can surrender and be treated according to the laws of war. Or you can try to self-destruct and we will board you before you succeed. Or you can drift here until your life support fails. Choose quickly. Silence lasted almost a minute. Then, slowly, the Krell ship's shields collapsed completely in the universal signal of surrender. It was the first time in recorded history that a Krell vessel had surrendered to anyone, Commander. Grant looked at Hayes with something like, 7 minutes total, she said quietly. We just changed the entire galaxy in 7 minutes. The council chamber had never experienced such complete silence. Ambassador Victor stood at his position, watching the battle recordings play for what must have been the 20th time, still could not fully process what he was seeing. Around him, the other council members seemed equally stunned. This cannot be accurate, Councillor Dex muttered. The Krell have never been defeated. Their technology is centuries beyond anything the humans possess. How is this possible? High Chancellor Mirasol's energy form pulsed with what might have been thoughtful analysis. They did not defeat Krell technology, she said slowly. They defeated Krell tactics. Watch the attack pattern again carefully. The humans did not try to match the Krell ship for ship or weapon for weapon. They created complete chaos. They forced the Krell to fight in conditions where superior technology meant less than superior aggression. Admiral Hayes had been summoned to address the council, though the tone of the invitation was considerably more respectful than it had been a week ago. He stood in the center of the great chamber wearing his formal uniform, with Commander Grant and Colonel Bennett on either side of him. Outside the station, 300 human warships maintained defensive positions, a reminder that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. Admiral Hayes, Victor began, his voice carefully controlled. Your victory was remarkable. However, we must discuss your methods. You lost 47 ships. Over 12,000 of your people died. By any civilized standard, those casualties are completely unacceptable. Hayes met the alien's gaze steadily. By our standards, we won. Every person who died today volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. They believed the objective was worth the potential cost. That may be something your civilization has forgotten how to understand. We do not calculate acceptable losses before a battle. We calculate necessary sacrifices. Barrack, someone muttered from one of the environmental chambers. Hayes turned toward the voice. Perhaps, but effective. The Krell are finished as a threat. Their fleet is destroyed or captured, and it took us 7 minutes. How long have you been fighting them? How many systems did you lose while you debated proper tactics and acceptable casualty rates? No one had an answer for that. The truth was uncomfortable, but it was impossible to deny. Mirasol's form brightened. Admiral, the Council acknowledges your success and is grateful for your assistance. However, we must address the tactical choices you made. You used nuclear weapons, which have been banned by galactic law for 10,000 years. You employed kamikaze tactics. You deliberately sacrificed your own personnel. These are considered war crimes by every civilized species. Hayes folded his arms. Then it is fortunate we are not yet bound by your laws. You asked for our help when you were facing extinction. We provided that help in the way we knew would work. If you object to our methods, I am certain the next species that threatens to destroy you will have much better manners. The chamber fell silent again. It was difficult to argue with success, especially when the alternative had been total defeat. Admiral Victor said more carefully, Please understand our concerns. Humanity's approach to warfare disturbs us deeply. You treat death with a casualness that we find shocking. You celebrate warriors and build monuments to violence. You seem to view war as something normal rather than a tragic failure of civilization. Commander Grant stepped forward, her voice sharp with barely controlled anger. We treat death with the utmost respect, she said. Every single person who died today made a conscious choice. They chose to stand between you and annihilation. They chose to protect civilizations they had never even met before this week. Maybe that kind of sacrifice is something your advanced societies have forgotten the meaning of. But do not dare suggest we take it lightly. Colonel Bennett activated a holographic display showing data they had extracted from the captured Krell ship. We have already broken their communication encryption, he said. Within days, we will have complete intelligence on their home territories, fleet dispositions, and strategic plans. The war is not over, but the Krell now know they can be beaten. That changes everything. Counselor Thax leaned forward in his chamber. You are suggesting continued military operations against the Krell? I am suggesting we end this war properly, Hayes replied. You wanted a defensive victory to make them go away. We gave you that. But if you want actual lasting peace, you need to make them understand that attacking Council space means their own destruction. That requires a different kind of operation. An invasion, Victor said flatly. You want to invade Krell territory? Want to finish what they started, Hayes corrected. Or you can return to your old strategies and hope they do not rebuild their fleet and try again in 10 years. The choice is yours. The council members began a complex series of communications, a diplomatic dance that had evolved over thousands of years. Humans waited patiently, knowing that this decision would determine not just the fate of the war, but humanity's place in the galactic community. Finally, after nearly an hour of discussion, High Chancellor Mirasol spoke. The Council will debate your proposal formally. This decision is too important to make hastily. However, I can announce that humanity's provisional membership is hereby upgraded to full Council status effective immediately. You have earned your place among the galactic community, though I suspect we may come to regret the manner in which you earned it. Hayes allowed himself a slight smile. Ambassador, you have barely begun to understand what humanity is capable of. But you are going to learn. I promise you that. As the humans departed the chamber, Victor watched them go with mixed feelings. They had saved the Council from certain destruction. But in doing so, they had introduced something into galactic civilization that had not existed for millennia. A species that was genuinely good at warfare. The implications of that were staggering. The galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place. But perhaps, Victor thought, it had also become a much safer one. 3 months after the 7-minute battle that changed galactic history, Admiral Jacob Hayes stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Earth Defense Force vessel Sovereign. The ship was twice the size of the Valiant and incorporated technology from a dozen different alien species. All of it filtered through humanity's particular genius for weaponization. Outside the massive windows, construction crews assembled what would become the first joint human-alien battle station. The war with the Krell Dominion had ended not with another grand battle, but with a negotiated surrender. Human forces had pushed deep into Krell territory using tactics that terrified both the Krell and the Council observers. They did not try to conquer planets directly. Instead, they destroyed infrastructure, crippled supply lines, and eliminated communication networks. They made it impossible for the Krell to sustain their military operations. Within 6 weeks, the Krell leadership had agreed to complete demilitarization and Council oversight of their territory. It was a humiliating defeat for a species that had never known anything but victory for humanity. However, it was just the beginning. Commander Lisa Grant joined Hayes at the window, watching as alien workers collaborated with human engineers on the new station. Strange how quickly things change, she said. 6 months ago we were alone, isolated on our one planet and a few colonies. Now we are training half the galaxy's military forces. They are afraid of us, Hayes observed calmly. That is natural and probably healthy. But they are also learning that being afraid of someone is different from being protected by them. We are showing them that difference. Some council members are still pushing back, Grant said. Ambassador Victor submitted another formal complaint yesterday about our training methods. He claims we are making tea. He other species too aggressive. Hayes chuckled. He is upset because we are teaching his people that sometimes you have to take risks to achieve victory. That is not aggression. That is reality. War is not a mathematical equation where you input forces and calculate outcomes. It is chaos, and you have to be comfortable operating in chaos to win. Colonel Bennett approached carrying a data tablet. Admiral, we just received a request from the Zellery Confederation. They are having a border dispute with a neighboring species. Things are getting tense. They want our assistance. Send military advisors, Hayes decided. But make it clear, we expect both sides to comply with council law. We are not mercenaries who fight for the highest bidder. We fight to maintain peace and protect council members. Understood, sir, Bennett said, making notes on his tablet. Also, the council has formally requested that we establish a military academy. They want to send officer candidates from every member species to learn human tactical doctrine. Hayes nodded slowly. Approve it. Set up the academy on Earth. Let them see where we come from. Let them understand that our approach to warfare did not come from nowhere. It evolved from thousands of years of hard experience. As Bennett departed to implement the orders, Grant turned back to the window. You know what we have become, do you not? She asked quietly. We are not just another member of the galactic community. We are its warriors, its protectors. The ones they call when civilization and diplomacy are not enough. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. The blue planet looked peaceful from this distance, but he knew its history. Humanity had fought countless wars on that small world. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. But they had also learned from every conflict, refined their understanding of warfare, and emerged stronger each time. Every civilization needs people willing to do the difficult things, he finally said. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council built their society on the idea that violence could be eliminated through enlightenment and technology. They believed that advanced species naturally evolved beyond warfare. Then the Krell showed them the truth, which is, Grant asked. That peace is not the absence of violence, Hayes said. Peace is the result of being so thoroughly prepared for violence that no one dares disturb it. The Council wanted to avoid war entirely. We are teaching them how to win wars. There is a significant difference between those two goals. Grant considered this carefully. Do you think they will ever truly accept us? Or will we always be the barbarians they call when they need something destroyed? I think Hayes said thoughtfully that in 1,000 years they will tell stories about humanity. About how we came from one small world and changed the entire galaxy in 7 minutes. Some of those stories will call us saviors. Some will call us monsters. Most will probably call us both. And what will be the truth? Hayes smiled slightly. The truth is that we were soldiers. We did what soldiers have always done throughout history. We stood between our civilization and its enemies. We protected those who could not protect themselves. The Galactic Council just had to learn that sometimes that is exactly what civilization requires to survive. Far below, Earth continued its eternal rotation. A blue marble that had given birth to a species capable of extraordinary violence and extraordinary compassion. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Council had expected defeat when they had reluctantly contacted Earth for help. Instead, they received victory in 7 minutes. But what they had not understood, what they were only beginning to grasp, was that those 7 minutes were not an ending. They were a beginning, the beginning of an era when humanity would serve as the shield of galactic civilization. The warriors who ensured that peace meant more than just the absence of current conflict. The species who understood that sometimes you had to be willing to fight to protect the things worth preserving. And the universe, for better or worse, would have to learn to live with that new reality. The battle had ended in 7 minutes, but the legend would last forever. And humanity, once isolated and alone, had found its purpose among the stars. Not as conquerors, but as protectors. Not as destroyers, but as defenders. They had shown the galaxy that violence, properly directed and controlled, could be a tool for peace rather than chaos. It was a lesson that would reshape civilization itself. And it had all begun with 7 minutes of controlled fury that proved humanity's place in the cosmos. Androids, 300 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to small but deadly destroyers. Each one carried weapons that represented humanity's particular genius for destruction. Railguns that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Missile systems carrying nuclear warheads that other species had banned as too barbaric. Particle beam weapons, chemical lasers, and thousands of single-pilot fighters. Small craft that most alien species considered suicidal to operate. The flagship was the Earth Defense Force vessel Valiant, a dreadnought that had been designed specifically for combat against unknown threats. Hayes stood on its bridge as the fleet prepared to depart, looking out at the assembled ships. Each one carried a crew that had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not return. That was another thing that made humans different. They did not calculate acceptable losses before a battle. They simply asked who was willing to go. More people always volunteered than there were. Positions available, the journey to the Council's coordinates took 4 days of hard acceleration. The human ships pushed their engines to limits that made their alien observers nervous. But humans were used to taking risks. Their entire history was a story of people doing things that should have been impossible and succeeding through sheer determination. When they arrived at the Council station, Hayes was summoned to address the leadership. He took Commander Grant and Colonel Bennett with him, leaving the fleet under the command of his most trusted captains. The Council chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. Alien beings of every description filled environmental chambers designed for their specific biology. Some breathed methane. Others existed as energy patterns. A few were so strange that Hayes could not even determine if they were individuals or collective organisms. Ambassador Victor, the crystalline being who seemed to speak for the Council, greeted them formally. Admiral Hayes, we are grateful that Earth has responded to our call. We have prepared detailed briefings on the tactical situation. Coordinator Thex will oversee the integration of your forces with our remaining fleets. Given your limited experience with warfare on this scale, we believe close supervision will be necessary. Hayes kept his expression neutral, but Grant noticed his jaw tighten slightly. Ambassador Hayes said carefully, we appreciate the offer, but we will be operating independently. We have reviewed your battle data extensively. Your tactics are sound, your technology impressive, but you are losing. We intend to try a different approach. The chamber fell silent. Victor's crystalline form seemed to darken. Admiral the Krell have defeated forces 10 times larger than your fleet. This is not the time for human pride. You must understand that we have been fighting in space for thousands of years before your species even achieved powered flight. And you have been losing for 6 months, Hayes replied, his voice calm but firm. We do not mean disrespect, Ambassador, but you asked for our help. That means letting us help our way. Now where is this Krell fleet? The Krell Armada appeared exactly where the Council's computers predicted it would. 47 warships, each one massive enough to destroy a planet by itself, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their hulls were dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making them look like holes cut in the fabric of space itself. Energy signatures blazed across every scanner as their weapon systems powered up. Admiral Hayes watched from the bridge of the Valiant as the enemy fleet advanced. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. No one spoke unnecessarily. Everyone knew their role. This was what they had trained for their entire careers, even if they had never imagined the enemy would be aliens from another star system. All ships report ready, Commander Grant announced from her station. 300 vessels holding position, weapons powered down, engines cold, just like you ordered. To the Council observers watching from their distant station, it must have looked like the human fleet was frozen in fear. The small Earth ships hung motionless in space, while the massive Krell warships bore down on them like predators approaching helpless prey. Several Council members sent urgent messages asking if the humans needed assistance. If perhaps they had underestimated the threat, Hayes ignored them all. He was watching the Krell formation carefully, comparing it to the dozens of battle recordings he had studied. They are not changing their approach, he said quietly. Same formation, same speed, same tactics they have used in every engagement. Colonel Bennett nodded from the tactical station. They have won every battle the same way. Overwhelming firepower, superior technology, perfect coordination. Why would they change? Because they have never fought anyone crazy enough to fight back properly, Hayes said. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, "This is Admiral Hayes. You know the plan. Every captain has tactical authority. Execute when ready." Throughout the human fleet, commanding officers received the order and smiled grimly. This was not how the Council fought their wars. The aliens believed in coordinated fleet movements, with every ship following a central tactical plan. Humans had learned centuries ago that rigid plans rarely survived contact with the enemy. Instead, they trusted their officers to make decisions, to improvise, to take advantage of opportunities as they appeared. "Krell fleet entering weapons range," Bennett announced. "They are charging their primary energy weapons." "Light them up," Hayes ordered. 300 human warships came alive simultaneously. Engines blazed to full power, pushing accelerations that would have killed most alien species. The neat defensive formation that the Council expected never materialized. Instead, the human ships scattered in what looked like complete chaos, each one moving independently, following no apparent pattern. The Krell fleet hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Their targeting computers designed to fight logical opponents who followed predictable tactics suddenly had 300 targets moving in 300 different directions. By the time their systems had recalculated target priorities, the human fleet had closed half the distance between them. "Launch fighters," Hayes ordered calmly, from every human ship. Smaller craft poured out like a swarm of angry insects. Thousands of single-pilot fighters, each one piloted by a volunteer who understood they might not survive the next 10 minutes. They accelerated even harder than the larger ships, weaving and dodging in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully practiced maneuvers. The Krell opened fire. Massive energy beams lanced through space, each one capable of cutting a Council warship in half. Dozens of human fighters vanished in bursts of light and debris. But there were too many targets moving too unpredictably. The Krell formation began to break apart as individual. Ships tried to track multiple threats simultaneously. That was exactly what Hayes had been waiting for now, he said quietly. Hidden among the fighter wings were special drones, small automated platforms carrying nuclear warheads. The Council had outlawed nuclear weapons 10,000 years ago as too barbaric for civilized warfare. Humans had spent 3 centuries making them more efficient, more powerful, and more controllable. The missiles streaked through the Krell formation at incredible speeds, too fast for the alien targeting systems to effectively track. They were not aimed at the Krell ships themselves. Hayes had studied the battle recordings carefully and noticed something important. Krell shields were nearly impenetrable from outside, designed to absorb and deflect incoming energy. But shields had to allow energy to pass outward for the ship's own weapons to function. The nuclear warheads detonated inside the Krell formation, creating massive pulses of electromagnetic radiation. The explosions did not break through the shields directly. Instead, they created cascading interference patterns that disrupted the shield generators themselves. In milliseconds, the perfect geometric formation became a scattered group of isolated ships with flickering defenses. "All ships, weapons free," Hayes ordered. "Target their engines. Disable them." The human warships opened fire with everything they had. Railguns sent solid metal projectiles screaming through space at velocities that turned them into devastating kinetic weapons. Particle beams carved through weakened shields. Missile salvos overwhelmed point defense systems through sheer numbers. The Krell tried to return fire, but their doctrine had no answer for opponents who simply did not care about taking damage. A human destroyer, its hull breached and half its crew dead, rammed directly into a Krell cruiser rather than retreat. The explosion created a debris field that damaged 2 other Krell ships. Fighter pilots whose weapons were exhausted deliberately crashed into shield generators and weapon emplacements. One dreadnought, its reactor failing, accelerated directly into a Krell flagship in an impact that was visible from neighboring star systems. It was brutal. It was costly. It was absolutely effective. The Krell had never encountered an enemy willing to trade lives for victory. Their calculations had no variables for opponents who viewed death as an acceptable price rather than something to be avoided at all costs. "Time check," Hayes said. his voice steady despite the chaos on the tactical displays. 6 minutes 40 seconds since first engagement, Bennett reported. The last functional Krell warship, its engines destroyed and weapons offline, drifted alone in space. Its shields were down, its hull. The massive space station hung in the darkness between stars, a structure so large it could hold entire cities within its walls. For thousands of years, this place had been the center of galactic civilization. Today, however, the Great Hall was filled with fear instead of the usual calm. Discussions. Ambassador Victor stood in the center of the chamber. His body was made of living crystal that caught and reflected the light from distant suns. He had seen many crises in his long life, but nothing like this. His voice echoed through the hall as he spoke to the assembled representatives of 47 different alien species. The enemy has broken through our defensive lines, he announced. 12 star systems have fallen in the last few weeks. Our best calculations show that we will lose everything within 3 months if nothing changes. The creatures in the hall shifted nervously. Some floated in special chambers filled with their home atmosphere. Others stood on platforms designed for their particular biology. All of them understood what this meant. The Krell Dominion had come from the edge of the galaxy 6 months ago, and since then, every fleet sent against them had been destroyed. High Chancellor Mirasol spoke next. She was a being of pure energy, her consciousness held together by powerful magnetic fields. Her voice sounded like distant thunder. We have tried everything we know. Our combined military forces cannot stop them. The Krell have technology we cannot match. Perhaps it is time to consider something we never thought we would need to do. Counselor Thex, a creature with 6 eyes and skin like armor, knew what she meant. You want to contact the humans, he said slowly. The violent ones from that small blue planet. Yes, Mirasol replied. They have been asking to join our council for 30 years. We always said no. We thought they were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. But now we need someone dangerous. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Many council members argued against it. The humans were primitives, they said. Humans had only been traveling in space for 300 years. They still fought wars among themselves. Their planets were divided into competing nations. What could such a young and violent species possibly do against an enemy that had defeated the combined might of 47 advanced civilizations? But others pointed out the cold mathematics of their situation. Without help, the Galactic Council would cease to exist. The Krell did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply conquered and moved on. Every day of debate meant more systems lost, more billions of lives ended. Victor had spent time studying human history, something few council members had bothered to do. What he found disturbed him. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. They had refined warfare into something approaching an art form. They studied ancient battles the way other species studied poetry. They built monuments to their warriors and told stories about famous generals, where most civilized species viewed war as a tragic failure of diplomacy. Humans seemed to view it as an inevitable part of existence. They prepared for it constantly. They maintained huge militaries even during times of peace. They practiced for conflicts that might never happen. It was, by galactic standards, completely irrational. But the Krell were not rational enemies. They could not be reasoned with or negotiated with. Perhaps, Victor thought, it took an irrational species to fight an irrational war. The vote was finally called. By the narrowest of margins, the Council agreed to send a message to Earth. They would offer humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council in exchange for military assistance against the Krell Dominion. No one expected much. The humans would probably send a small fleet, lose badly, and that would be the end of it. At least the Council could say they had tried everything. What none of them understood was that humans had been waiting for this moment since the first time they had looked up at the stars and wondered who else was out there. They had hoped for friendly neighbors. They had prepared for hostile ones. And now, finally, they would get their chance to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. The message was sent on a frequency that Earth had been monitoring for decades. Ever since their first deep space probes had detected signs of advanced civilizations, The translation took several hours, but when it was finally decoded, it created an immediate response. Within a day, Earth's military leaders had convened. Within 2 days, they had a plan. Within 3 days, 300 warships were being prepared for the longest military deployment in human history. The ships came from every nation on Earth. Old rivalries were set aside. For the first time in human history, the entire species was united behind a single goal. They were going to war. Not against each other this time, but against an alien threat. And they were going to show the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when they decided to fight. The Council waited nervously for Earth's response, expecting negotiations, demands, perhaps weeks of discussion about terms and conditions. Instead, they received a simple message: we accept. 300 ships are en route. Estimated arrival in 4 days. We will need all tactical data on the enemy. For days. The Council had expected months of preparation. Humans, it seemed, did not waste time when there was a war to fight. As the human fleet accelerated toward the Council's coordinates, moving at speeds that made even advanced species nervous, Ambassador Victor reviewed the data they had sent, along with their acceptance. Human ships were smaller than most Council vessels. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards, many of them based on simple chemical or nuclear reactions. Their shields were weak. Their armor was basic metal alloys. On paper, the human fleet should have been no match for even a single Krell warship. But Victor remembered something he had read in the human historical files. A quote from one of their ancient military philosophers: "Victory goes not to the strongest, but to those most willing to pay the price for it." Council had always tried to minimize casualties, to fight wars with acceptable losses, to preserve as many lives as possible, even in defeat. It was the civilized thing to do. But the humans, Victor suspected, had a very different definition of acceptable losses. He watched the approaching human fleet on the long-range sensors, and felt something he had not felt in centuries. It might have been hope, or it might have been fear. Perhaps when it came to humanity, those two emotions were closer than anyone wanted to admit. The galaxy was about to change. Victor just hoped it would survive the transformation. Admiral Jacob Hayes stood in the command center of Station Olympus, humanity's largest military installation, watching the decoded message scroll across the holographic display for the third time. At 52 years old, he had spent his entire adult life in the military. He had fought in colonial disputes on Mars, helped establish the Outer System Defense Network, and trained thousands of officers. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. "They are actually asking us for help," said Commander Lisa Grant, standing beside him. She was younger than Hayes, only 38, but she had proven herself in combat more times than most officers twice her age. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her eyes were sharp as she studied the alien data. "After 30 years of ignoring every diplomatic message we sent, now they want our help." Hayes nodded slowly. "They are losing a war. Look at these battle recordings they sent us. The enemy, these Krell, are systematically destroying everything the Council sends against them." Colonel Ryan Bennett joined them at the display. He was the head of tactical operations, a man who had spent 20 years studying military history and strategy. He pulled up one of the battle recordings and let it play. "Their technology is incredible," he said quietly. "Those energy weapons are generating power levels we can barely measure. Their shields absorb hits that would vaporize our best ships. So why are they asking us?" Grant asked the question that everyone was thinking. "We are barely 3 centuries into space travel. Our technology is primitive compared to this. What did they think we can do?" Hayes rewound the recording and played it again, this time focusing not on the Krell ships, but on the Council fleet's response. "Watch how they fight," he said. "Perfect formations, coordinated targeting. They retreat when their casualties reach a certain percentage. Everything is measured, calculated, civilized." Bennett understood immediately. "They fight by rules." "Exactly," Hayes said. "And the Krell are beating them because the Krell fight to win." The Council is fighting not to lose. There is a big difference. Grant pulled up more of the tactical data. The Council has sent us complete intelligence on the Krell. Ship specifications, battle recordings, strategic assessments. They expect us to integrate our forces with theirs, follow their tactical coordinators. That would be a mistake, Hayes said firmly. We did not come all this way to lose the same way they have been losing. We fight our way, or we do not fight at all. Within 6 hours, Hayes had assembled a complete battle plan. Within 12 hours, the Earth Coalition Council had approved it unanimously. The vote was historic. Every nation on Earth agreed. There were no debates, no political maneuvering, no arguments about who would lead or who would get credit. For the first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. The fleet that assembled was impressive by human street.